Welcome. Thank you for joining this question and answer portion for today's tutorial. My name is Rob Cairns and I will be one of the moderators today, and I am the Vice President of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers.
Hello, I'm Manny, and I'm excited to be joining Rob as one of your moderators for today's Q&A session. I am a member of OGEHR's Communications Committee, and as the email coordinator, I am responsible for the weekly email that is sent out to our membership.
Today's tutorial on demystifying meters was presented by Debbie Fingas. In addition to this tutorial, Debbie has two more in store for us, Four in Hands on Sunday, April 11th, and Chimes on Saturday, May 1st. Debbie, we are really pleased that you're able to share your expertise with us through all of these OGEHR tutorial videos.
Yes, thank you, Debbie, for joining us today. Debbie is the Minister of Music at Trinity United Church in Cobourg, where she accompanies weekly services and conducts two children's choirs, the Chancel Choir and the Jubilate Handbell Choir. In addition to her church work, Debbie also enjoys being involved with local community music groups, including the Associate Director for La Jeunesse Choir. Debbie is also the Chair-elect of the newly formed Handbell Musicians of Canada. Welcome, Debbie. So at this point, we will be taking questions submitted via the Zoom text chat.
First, I want to say that it was great to watch the tutorial. It's a wonderful kind of really quick step through really simple meters right to the very complex meters. So thank you for putting all of that together. I suppose first question is about beaming. Do you think you can elaborate a little on how beams can help us in reading music and maybe helping with some of those complex meters that you got to later in the tutorial?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, really beaming, I think, is, so just to be really clear, what Rob's talking about is if you have an eighth note and it has a little tail, it stands alone. And rather than just writing, eighth note, eighth note, eighth note, sometimes we join them together with a horizontal line, and that's what you're meaning by beam. And the way that the eighth notes are grouped together or beamed together really helps us with our counting and then figuring out where to ring your notes. So if they're two, beamed together, you probably count it like one and, or if it's three, it'd be like one and that also helps you, your brain say, okay, I'm in this particular meter, and kind of to organize the bar.
Yeah, it's a nice kind of visual representation of whether your piece is in simple or compound meter. Right,
exactly. Yeah, so I think beaming can be really helpful, and sometimes you don't even need to know what meter you're in. You can just sort of count it one and, right? And just based on the beaming alone. So that way, if you've got a lot of changing meters stuff, it doesn't really matter what the total number of beats or pulses in the bar is. You can just look at those beams to kind of help figure it out.
So Debbie, you probably work with, being such a varied musician, working with such a wide variety of groups, you probably have to work with people of varying skill levels. And have you found anything in particular that is helpful for someone who's new to music, who is, learning about meters and counting and beats and grouping for the first time?
I love teaching new people who are new to reading and new to ringing. Yeah, we do a lot of writing exercises on the board. We do a lot of clapping and counting out loud and helping each other, right? So, and often I will break down, if there's a complicated rhythm, I'll break it down into simpler, like a simpler rhythm, and then we'll build on it and we'll kind of learn it and build on it kind of line by line, and I'll make up an exercise, writing in the counts for sure. Not a big fan of circling your notes, but I am a fan of writing in your counts. So yeah, we definitely do that kind of thing. Yep. It's And starting slow, right? And starting from the repertoire as well. So I don't teach them things unnecessarily. So we don't get into all of that complex stuff unless we're confronted with a piece like you saw at the end of the tutorial. Then we start looking at those specific things.
Right. Thanks, Debbie.
A question from me based on what you were just talking about. You said you're not a big fan of circling your notes. Why is that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I do it for my brand new ringers that are coming into my level 2+ group for the first little bit. But I really want to get people to a point where they can look and find their own notes and find their own and start actually reading the music for themselves. In my bell choirs, we switch parts all the time. So you aren't a D and E ringer, you are an everything ringer. And we switch around for pretty much every piece. In COVID times, it's been a little bit different. So, but because within one rehearsal, we don't switch bells. So we've been planning things a little bit differently. But I try to wean them off note highlighting and circling as soon as possible so that they can start to learn. And then they become more adaptable to new music quicker, right? They're not like, oh, just a minute, I have to circle all of my notes. It's, they become better sight readers. And
that makes sense. I know that my beginning ringers, they do circle notes, but with my more advanced bells, they only circle, I suppose, in a section that's very complex, like it's very thickly scored, and usually it's kind of those battery bells that are right in the middle and have a hard time seeing it. But I've never thought about the whole circling note things because I know it's a help, but it's not the ends that you want to get to.
Long term, it's like a long term investment. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll let them circle their notes for the piece we're ringing, but then we'll do a warm up piece, which is like a level 1, where they're not allowed to circle. Right. So that they get used to looking at it. And that's what we do as a warm up. And then we go and bring our other stuff. A and B 5, that's a really nasty spot, right? On the staff, because it's so hard to find your part quickly. So, I mean, that's a little bit different if it's especially for a newer person. And some people just have trouble tracking. So, I mean, that's one of the considerations, I guess, when you're assigning bells to.
So yeah, Debbie, then as far as, rhythms and countings, do you have any kind of markings that you recommend to your novice ringers? I mean, sometimes, when I'm ringing a piece that's, got some really complicated rhythms, I sometimes put in above the bar line, above the music, above the staff, I'll put in little hashes where the main beats are, and so that you can kind of line up where your notes are in subdivision. Do you have any sort of techniques or recommended markings that you?
One of the things I really like to do, if I write out like all of the subdivisions, so like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then I circle the beat that they ring on. So let's say it's the rhythm is like bum, 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 right? So then I circle the 1, then I circle the and after the 2, and then I circle like the 4, and then they can see all the subdivisions. So when they're tracking, but they know which one they're ringing on. I find that helpful for beginners. Like you were saying, if you're a more advanced ringer, just even knowing where the main beat is, then you can sort of just judge, your syncopation or whatever from there.
Yeah, sometimes I find myself in really thickly scored music is kind of drawing vertical lines even through the entire bar where the main pulses are, because sometimes that really helps visually when you're playing a piece and you only have so much time to look at the bar before you actually need to play it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
We have a question from Mary in the chat room, and it might be kind of related to the last thing you were talking about, but could you walk us through how you would address a change in the time signature for one measure in a piece, say with an adult choir?
Yeah, just making sure, first of all, that they're aware that it's happening. And then sometimes I get them to write. So like when I'm conducting, if I'm conducting in 4, I write like a plus or if I'm conducting a 3, I might write like a triangle for 3. Sometimes those sort of symbols, if I teach them to the choir, they can write a triangle and then they're like, oh yeah, it's 3 for my visual people, or just writing 1 and 2 and 3 and a big 1 on the next bar. So because the problem isn't the beginning of the bar, it's the end of the bar, right? It's where they're switching back. So yeah, just making sure that they know where that following beat kind of comes in.
Yeah, the use of icons is a great thing. I know in conducting courses that I've done, putting in the triangles or a square or other icons really helps if you are conducting, but it can also really help if you are a player as well. Everybody can make use of those. So that's a great point.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of sort of, what's the word? I mean, verbalizations? Because I mean, sometimes, we've heard people say triplet, but triplet's not my favorite word to use because it's kind of awkward and it doesn't really fall well in the mouth, doesn't fit well in the mouth. Do you have, phrases that you like to use?
I don't usually do that. And there's not that there's anything wrong with that. I guess it's just the way my brain works, but yeah. I don't usually do that. No.
Yeah, because I guess in some of my choirs we've used like what chocolate for a triplet or blueberry. Personally, my favorite is triangle. So or triangle for 3 and circle for 2. So kind of like you do triangle, circle, circle, triangle, circle. Right? If you're doing like a bar of 6/8 and a bar of 2/4.
Yeah. Yeah, those can be really helpful to people. And I know in my drum circle, I have a percussion group. They use things like that to learn their rhythms and whatnot. I've never tried it with a handbell choir, and I mean, I probably should sort of take something from one group and apply it just to another. But yeah, it's a great idea.
I've seen people do that, like actually draw little triangles on their music, as Rob was saying, something similar to what his conducting background would dictate. Yeah,
for sure.
One of the things that you did talk about in your video was actually counting, and you would say 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and do you use that a fair bit with your groups? I know with my student groups, we're counting all the time. And also when I'm doing rehearsals with my adult group, I'm always counting out like that so that they understand what it is that I'm trying to give them.
I think it's particularly important for bells. Before I got really involved with bell choirs, I didn't do a lot of conscious number counting, but I think with bells, it's particularly important because we don't do something on every beat. Right? Like when you play the piano, it's you doing all the things all the time. But when it's, I think when it comes to bells, you really have to know where in the bar you are. So yeah, we do a lot of counting. We count out loud in rehearsal as well. I count out loud for them. They count out loud, but then you have to wean them off of it so that they don't do it by accident in performance. But yeah, no, absolutely. I count 2 ways. I either count, like if we're in 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or sometimes I count 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and. Depending on, like I know it's not the right beat in the bar, but I do that because if we're going from like different meters and stuff, or if I have like lots of triplets in there, or if I have, that way I don't need to know even what time signature we're in, right? Going back to the beaming thing. So sometimes in my head, I have trouble putting numbers to, so sometimes in my head, I don't even know that. But yes, we try to, and also when you're doing the bars, there's a conductor, it's like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4, right? So that they know what bar it is.
Yeah, I often do that. Yeah, just to keep things organized and avoid the person saying, what measure are we on? So yeah, which always happens.
Yes, it always does. Yeah. So there's different ways to go about doing it, but as long as you're consistent and your group knows what you're doing, then it's all legit.
So Debbie, then, as You mentioned some of the challenges, especially for a handbell choir. As a player, because you're not playing on every beat, you often stand around with not a lot to do in some parts. And then other times you're just very, very busy and looking down and not really paying much attention to what's going around you. As a director, have you found that there's anything that you can do to sort of guide your choir around tricky time changes and tricky meters? Is there anything that you do visually or to indicate that there's something exciting is about to happen?
Often I'll give, if it's a particular passage, I'll give just the downbeat with my left hand. So if I'm conducting, I'll just reinforce beat 1 and where it happens. That's one thing the director can do. And sort of, I do it kind of like this way, like my conduct is usually this way, right? But I kind of give them it's here's the beginning of the bar, here's the next one kind of thing. I don't do that all the time, of course, but if it's like a spot like that, that helps people see, I think, out of their corner of their eye where we are, and that kind of thing. Sometimes I will use fingers if it's helpful, to just sort of remind people of things. But usually, I think the vertical beginning of the bar would be the closest thing that's nonverbal.
Right. So sorry, what was that about your fingers? What is it that you do?
Well, like sometimes, if it's bar 3, or sometimes it's right. Or,
right.
Just so they kind of know where things are, or like, or if we're changing, like I'll give them a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1. Sometimes.
Oh, right. To remind them that they're going to be doing a bar of 3 and then going back to a bar of 4. Okay.
And again,
understood.
As long as they know, we just recorded this week a processional for Palm Sunday. And, and I said to them, I'm not really sure how long it's going to take for you to walk down the aisle and get into position and then for us to play it again. So it might be 3 times through and it might be 4 and I don't really know. So, but as long as you have a signal that they know means this is the last time, right? It's that kind of thing. As long as you communicate with them ahead of time and they know what to expect from you. That's important. Communicate with your ringers.
Thanks, Debbie.
I think we have one final question for you, and we're going to kind of put you on the spot here and see if you're able to answer this one. Can you suggest an easy piece that uses 2 different time signatures? Like one of those ones where it goes back and forth and it isn't just a time signature change. I don't know. This is really putting you on the spot. It might not be able to actually pull one out of your hat, so to speak.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Does anybody else have any? I'll turn it to the group.
I looked at that question and I thought, I can't pick one out off the top of my head. But maybe what we can do is, if we do find one of those, we can actually include it as a link on our page, because it would be nice to be able to see an example of one of these types of pieces that does use that kind of 2 signatures, time signatures at the beginning.
The one at the end of the tutorial uses 2 at the beginning, but it's tricky. It's not easy. And then there's the ones that go back and forth consistently between, and I can't think of a specific example of that, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Manny, do you have any experience with that?
I think that I'm not the best person to ask. I have a terrible memory. I sort of am always, for the season, I only know that set of repertoire. And then once the season ends, I just kind of wipe it all. And it's fallen out of my brain until I have my next set of music.
Man, we were hoping that you would be the one to come through for us.
Sorry,
with
team.
An excellent example.
Sorry, team. We'll have to put some examples up on the website when we can find some good ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been a great talk about demystifying meters for after the tutorial. So, Debbie, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Debbie.
Welcome.
All right, so moving forward, everyone, please mark Sunday, April 11th on your calendars and plan on being part of OGEHR's next handbell tutorial session. Debbie will be our clinician once again when she will be presenting a tutorial on foreign hand ringing. So this tutorial will be aimed at new foreign hand ringers, but even experienced foreign hand ringers, we encourage you to participate. You will definitely learn something by watching Debbie's video and participating in the subsequent Q&A session.
On behalf of the Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers, we want to thank you for joining us this afternoon and watching Debbie's video and then participating in the following Q&A session. Thank you.